I never expected my son's funeral to be the beginning of my homelessness. 2 weeks after we buried Michael, my daughter-in-law Rebecca stood in the kitchen I had cooked in for 43 years and said those words I'll never forget. "The will is clear, this isn't your house anymore." My heart stopped. I was 74 years old, a recent widow, now grieving my only child, and suddenly I had nowhere to go. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The day Michael died began like any other Tuesday. I was in my garden tending to my tomato plants when I got the call. The hospital was brief, clinical. "Mrs. Thompson, your son has been in an accident. You should come right away." I dropped everything and drove to Memorial Hospital in a daze, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. I kept telling myself it couldn't be that serious. Michael was only 46 in perfect health. He'd just run a half marathon the previous weekend. But when I arrived at the hospital and saw Rebecca's face, makeup streaked with tears, her normally perfect blonde hair disheveled, I knew. He had a heart attack while driving, the doctor explained later. It was sudden. He wouldn't have suffered. That was supposed to comfort me, I think. My son, my beautiful boy, my only child, gone in an instant without warning. How could his heart just stop? There had been no symptoms, no family history. David, my husband, had died of cancer 5 years earlier, but we did time to prepare to say goodbye. With Michael, there was nothing, just breakfast together Sunday morning and then gone. The funeral was a blur of faces and platitudes. "He's in a better place. At least it was quick. You raised such a wonderful man." Rebecca handled most of the arrangements, which I was grateful for. I could barely function. She ordered the flowers, contacted Michael's friends, chose the casket. Throughout it all, she was poised and controlled, breaking down only occasionally. I thought her strength was admirable. I didn't realize it was calculated. After the funeral, I returned to the house I had shared with David and Michael for decades. When Michael married Rebecca 8 years ago, they had decided to live with me. "Mom, it makes sense," Michael had said. "The house is paid off, it's too big for just you, and this way we can save for our future." It seemed like a perfect arrangement. I had company after losing David, and they had a mortgage-free start to their marriage. We renovated the basement into a private apartment for them, and for 8 years we coexisted happily, or so I thought. After Michael's death, Rebecca was distant but polite. She spent most of her time on the phone with people I didn't know or locked away in their basement apartment. I assumed she was grieving in her own way. I tried to give her space while also offering comfort, cooking her favorite meals, handling the household chores, fielding phone calls from well-wishers. Then exactly 2 weeks after we buried my son, Rebecca asked me to sit down at the kitchen table. "We need to talk about arrangements going forward," she said, setting a folder of papers between us. "What arrangements?" I asked, confused. "The house, your living situation." She opened the folder and slid a document toward me. "Michael and I had a will drawn up last year. Everything was left to each other. Since he died first, the house now belongs to me, all of it." I stared at the paper, not comprehending. "But this was David's and my house. We paid it off 30 years ago. Michael never owned it." Rebecca's expression hardened. "Actually, he did. You signed ownership over to him 5 years ago after David died." And then I remembered, there had been a stack of papers. Michael had said something about estate planning, about avoiding probate when I eventually passed. "It's just a formality, Mom," he'd assured me. "Nothing will change," and nothing had changed until now. "But this has been my home for 43 years, I said, my voice breaking. Surely Michael didn't intend for me to be forced out if something happened to him. "The will is clear," Rebecca repeated, her voice detached. "This isn't your house anymore. I'm planning to sell it." The room seemed to tilt. "Sell it, but where am I supposed to go?" "You have your Social Security," she said, as if that answered the question. "And I'm sure there must be senior apartments you can afford somewhere. I can give you 30 days to figure it out." 30 days. After 4 decades, I had 30 days to leave my home, my garden, the walls that held my memories, the kitchen where I taught Michael to bake cookies, the staircase where we'd marked his height every birthday until he was taller than his father, the bedroom where I'd nursed both my husband and son through illnesses, all of it gone. "This can't be what Michael wanted," I whispered. "Did you two discuss this?" Rebecca's eyes met mine coldly. "Michael trusted me to make the right decisions. This house is worth nearly $400,000 in today's market. I'm not going to let that go to waste when I could use that money to build a new life. I've already lost enough." I sat in stunned silence as she continued explaining her plans. She had already contacted a realtor. The house would be listed next week. She expected it to sell quickly in this market. She wanted me to start packing immediately. "You can take the furniture from your bedroom and personal items, of course," she said, as if she was being generous. "The rest stays with the house for staging." That night I couldn't sleep. I paced my bedroom, no, not my bedroom anymore, trying to understand how this had happened. Had Michael really intended this? Had he and Rebecca discussed throwing me out if he died? It seemed impossible. My son had always been thoughtful, loving. Even as a teenager, when most kids were self-absorbed, he'd been considerate. I couldn't believe he would knowingly make me homeless at 74, but the will existed. My signature was on the property transfer. Whatever Michael's intentions, the legal reality was clear. I had no home. The next morning, I called Michael's childhood friend Thomas, who had become a lawyer. He agreed to meet me for coffee that afternoon. "I'm so sorry about Michael," he said as we sat down. "I still can't believe he's gone." I nodded, fighting back tears. Thomas and Michael had been friends since kindergarten. Seeing him was another painful reminder of my loss. "I need your help, Thomas, professionally." I explained the situation with Rebecca and the house. As I spoke, his expression grew increasingly troubled. "Can she really do this?" I asked when I finished. "Just take my home and throw me out." Thomas sighed deeply. "Unfortunately, if the house was transferred to Michael and the will leaves everything to Rebecca, then legally, yes. The house is hers to do with as she wishes." My heart sank. "There's nothing I can do. I'd need to see the exact documents, but based on what you're describing, your options are limited. There might be grounds to contest the will if you believe Michael was coerced or if the transfer of the house to him was done under false pretenses, but those cases are difficult to prove." He hesitated. "Was there any tension between you and Rebecca before Michael's death?" I thought about it. Rebecca had always been polite, if somewhat distant. She wasn't the warm, affectionate type, but she'd never been unkind. "Nothing significant. We were never extremely close, but we got along." "And the house transfer, do you remember the circumstances clearly?" I tried to recall that day 5 years ago. It had been a difficult time. David had been gone just 6 months. I was still deep in grief, often forgetful, sometimes struggling to handle basic tasks. Michael had taken over much of the paperwork and financial management. He said it was for estate planning purposes, to avoid probate. He assured me nothing would change, that it was just a formality. Thomas frowned. "That's concerning. If you weren't properly informed about what you were signing, and especially if you were in a vulnerable state due to grief, there might be grounds to challenge the transfer. But it would be your word against a document with your signature, and Michael isn't here to confirm your understanding." He promised to look into it further if I could find the original transfer documents, but his expression didn't give me much hope. As I was leaving, Thomas put a hand on my shoulder. "Have you tried talking to Rebecca, really talking to her? Sometimes these situations are about more than just money. There might be emotions involved that you're not seeing." I promised to try, though I didn't share his optimism. When I returned home, no, not home anymore, I found Rebecca in the kitchen talking to a stranger who turned out to be the realtor. They had champagne flutes in hand, apparently celebrating their new partnership. They fell silent when I entered. "Margaret, this is Linda from Prestige Realty," Rebecca said, not quite meeting my eyes. "She'll be listing the house next Monday." I nodded stiffly at Linda, who had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Could I speak with you privately?" I asked Rebecca. The realtor quickly excused herself, saying she had enough photos for now and would be in touch with staging suggestions. When she was gone, I sat down at the kitchen table, the same spot where Rebecca had delivered her shocking news the day before. "Rebecca, I'd like to understand what's happening. This was my home for over 40 years. David and I raised Michael here. All my memories are in these walls. Did Michael really want me thrown out if something happened to him?" For a moment, Rebecca's composed facade cracked. "What Michael wanted doesn't matter anymore, does it? He's gone, just like our future together, just like the family we were planning to start." Her voice caught. "We were going to try IVF this year, did you know that? We'd been saving for it for 3 years. Now I'll never have his children. I'll never have the family we planned." I hadn't known. Michael and Rebecca had been married 8 years without children, and I'd stopped asking about grandchildren years ago, assuming they'd chosen not to have them. "I'm so sorry," I said softly. "I didn't realize." "Of course you didn't," she snapped. "You never really tried to know me. 8 years living in the same house, and you still treat me like a guest. Always Michael and Rebecca, never just Rebecca. Always his wife, never your daughter." Her words stunned me. Had I been so distant? I'd always tried to respect their privacy, to not intrude on their marriage. Had that come across as rejection? "I never meant to make you feel unwelcome," I said. "I thought I was giving you space." "Space," she laughed bitterly. "You gave the entire house Michael's touch. Every decoration, every piece of furniture, all chosen by you or commemorating some moment in Michael's life. There was never room for me to make this house my home too." I looked around the kitchen with new eyes. The walls were the same yellow I'd painted with David 30 years ago. The refrigerator was covered with magnets from places we'd visited as a family, but none from trips Rebecca and Michael had taken together. The photos on the walls were all from before Rebecca's time. Had I really been so thoughtless? I didn't realize, I repeated lamely. I would have changed things if you'd said something. It doesn't matter now, Rebecca said, her moment of vulnerability passing. The house will be sold and we can both start fresh somewhere new. Rebecca, please, I'm 74. Starting fresh isn't as easy at my age. Where will I go? For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of sympathy in her eyes. Then she straightened her shoulders. That's not my problem. Michael left everything to me and I need to look out for myself now. As she walked away, I realized Thomas was right. This wasn't just about money. There were years of resentment and hurt feelings involved. But understanding the emotional complexity didn't solve my practical problem. In 30 days, I would have nowhere to live. That night, I couldn't bear to stay in the house with Rebecca. I called my sister Alice, who lived about an hour away, and asked if I could visit for a few days. Of course, she said immediately. I've been worried about you being alone after Michael's funeral anyway. I packed a small suitcase, left a note for Rebecca saying I'd be back in a few days, and drove to Alice's house in the dark. Alice is 5 years younger than me and had been widowed for nearly a decade. Her small 2-bedroom house was cluttered but comfortable, filled with crafting supplies for her quilting business. You're welcome to stay as long as you need, she said after I explained the situation with Rebecca. The guest room is yours. It would only be temporary, I assured her, just until I figure out where to go. But as we both knew, my options were limited. My monthly Social Security check was modest. David and I had savings once, but much of it had gone to medical bills during his final illness. What remained wouldn't sustain me for long in today's rental market. The next morning, I called Thomas again and arranged to bring him the file box of documents I'd found in my bedroom closet. As I searched through years of paperwork, I discovered something interesting: the original deed to the house, showing that David and I had paid it off in 1991. I also found the transfer document that Michael had me sign 5 years ago. Reading it now with a clearer mind than I'd had in my grief, I could see that it was indeed a complete transfer of ownership. My signature was there alongside a notary stamp. I brought everything to Thomas's office. He reviewed the documents carefully while I waited anxiously. Finally, he looked up with a furrowed brow. Margaret, did you know there was a life estate provision in this transfer? I shook my head, not understanding. What does that mean? It means that while you transferred ownership to Michael, you retain the right to live in the house for the remainder of your life. It's right here. He pointed to a paragraph I'd never noticed. This says you have a life estate in the property, which means you have the legal right to occupy the house until your death, even though you no longer own it. My breath caught. So Rebecca can't force me out. Not legally, no. The life estate passes to you as the named holder of that interest, regardless of who inherits the property. Rebecca owns the house now, but she cannot sell it or evict you without your consent as long as you hold this life estate. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Why wouldn't Rebecca know about this? Thomas shrugged. Either she doesn't understand the legal implications of the transfer document, or, he hesitated, or she's hoping you don't know about it. The thought that Rebecca might be deliberately trying to deceive me was disturbing, but I couldn't dismiss it. She had been so so cold when telling me I had to leave. What should I do now? I asked. I'll draft a letter explaining the life estate provision and your legal right to remain in the home. We'll send it to Rebecca formally. After that, the ball is in her court. She can accept the situation or she can try to contest it, though I don't see grounds for her to do so successfully. I left Thomas's office feeling both relieved and anxious. I had a legal right to stay in my home, but what would this mean for my already strained relationship with Rebecca? Would asserting my rights make living together impossible? When I returned to Alice's house, I found her in the kitchen preparing dinner. Thomas found something interesting, I told her, explaining about the life estate. Alice's face lit up. That's wonderful news. Michael was looking out for you after all. Yes, but now I have to tell Rebecca. I'm not sure how she'll take it. Who cares how she takes it? Alice said bluntly. She tried to throw you out of your own home 2 weeks after your son's funeral. She doesn't deserve your consideration. But it wasn't that simple. Despite everything, Rebecca was still my son's widow, the woman he had loved, and we would potentially be living under the same roof for years to come. The next day, I drove back to the house, Thomas's letter in hand. Rebecca's car was in the driveway along with another vehicle I didn't recognize. I let myself in and found Rebecca and the realtor Linda at the kitchen table again, this time surrounded by paint swatches and fabric samples. "Margaret," Rebecca said, clearly surprised to see me. "I thought you were staying with your sister." I came back because we need to talk." Linda quickly gathered her samples. "I should go. We can finish this another time." When the realtor had left, I sat down across from Rebecca and placed Thomas's letter on the table. "I spoke with a lawyer about the house," I said. "He found something important in the transfer document." Rebecca's expression was guarded. "What are you talking about?" "When I transferred the house to Michael 5 years ago, there was a provision called a life estate. It means that while Michael and now you own the property, I have the legal right to live here for the rest of my life." I slid the letter across the table. "This explains everything. You can read it yourself." Rebecca's face went through a series of emotions, disbelief, anger, then a careful blankness. She read the letter slowly, then read it again. "This can't be right," she finally said. "Michael never mentioned any life estate. Did he show you the original transfer document?" I asked. Her silence was answer enough. "I don't think he focused on that provision," I continued more gently. "He probably thought it would never matter, that he would outlive me." Rebecca's hands trembled slightly as she set down the letter. "So you're saying I can't sell the house? I'm stuck here with you indefinitely." The way she phrased it stung, but I tried not to react. "The house can be sold, but only with my permission, and my right to live here would transfer to the new owners, which admittedly would make it difficult to sell at market value. So I'm trapped," she said flatly, "stuck in this museum to Michael's childhood with no way to move on or use the asset he left me." I could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. The house was worth $400,000, but with me having a life estate, its market value would be significantly less. A buyer would have to agree to let a 74-year-old woman live there rent-free for the rest of her life. Not an attractive proposition. "We could try to reach a compromise," I suggested. "Find a solution that works for both of us." "What kind of compromise?" she asked suspiciously. "I don't know yet. Maybe I could agree to the house being sold if a portion of the proceeds went towards securing me alternative housing. Or perhaps we could find a way to divide the house more effectively so we both have our own space." Rebecca was silent for a long moment, then she stood up abruptly. "I need to think about this, and I need to talk to my own lawyer." She gathered her things and left the kitchen. Moments later, I heard the door to the basement apartment slam shut. Over the next few days, Rebecca and I existed in uncomfortable silence. She stayed mostly in the basement, emerging only to get food or leave the house. I tried to give her space, knowing she was processing both grief and this unexpected legal complication. A week after I presented her with Thomas's letter, Rebecca finally approached me as I was tending to my garden. "I spoke with my lawyer," she said without preamble. "He confirmed the life estate provision." I nodded, continuing to pull weeds from around my tomato plants. My garden had always been my sanctuary, the place where I could think most clearly. "I still want to sell the house," she continued. "I can't stay here, Margaret. There are too many memories, too much of Michael everywhere I look. I need a fresh start." Looking up at her, I could see the grief etched in her face. Despite her coldness toward me, she had loved my son. That much I knew was true. "I understand," I said softly. "What does your lawyer suggest?" "He said we have 3 options. 1, I sell the house subject to your life estate, which would mean accepting a much lower price. 2, we try to reach a settlement where you give up your life estate rights in exchange for some portion of the proceeds. Or 3, we go to court and try to break the life estate, which he admits would be difficult and expensive." She sat down on the garden bench, suddenly looking exhausted. "What do you want to do, Margaret? Because I can't keep living like this in limbo." For the first time since Michael's death, I felt like Rebecca was actually seeing me, not as an obstacle or an intrusion, but as another person dealing with loss and uncertainty. "I want security," I said honestly. "At my age, the thought of starting over somewhere new is terrifying. This house isn't just walls and a roof to me. It's 43 years of memories. It's the familiar creak of that third stair. It's knowing exactly how the light falls through the kitchen window in the morning. It's home." Rebecca nodded slowly. "I understand that, but for me, it's becoming a prison of memories. Every room reminds me of what I've lost, what I'll never have now." An idea began to form in my mind. What if we explored option 2, but with a specific plan? If the house is worth $400,000, what if you kept $250,000 from the sale and $150,000 went toward purchasing a small condo for me? Something nearby, 1 level, easy for me to maintain as I get older. Rebecca considered this. "That might work, but what if there's nothing suitable in that price range around here? Then we adjust the numbers or look a little further out." The point is to find a solution where you get a substantial portion of the house's value to start fresh, and I get the security of having a home for the rest of my life. For the first time in weeks, I saw something like hope in Rebecca's eyes. "I'll think about it," she said, "and I'll talk to my realtor about what might be available in that price range." Over the next few days, our conversations became more practical and less emotionally charged. Rebecca asked Linda to look for both a buyer for our house and potential condos or small houses that might suit my needs. I called Thomas to discuss the legal framework for such an arrangement. 2 weeks later, Rebecca and I sat at the kitchen table with a new set of papers between us. "The Willow Creek condo is perfect for you," she said, showing me the listing again. 1 level, 2 bedrooms, a small patio for container gardening, and it's less than 3 miles from here. You'd still be in the same neighborhood, close to your friends and your church. The condo was listed at $180,000, more than the $150,000 we'd initially discussed, but Rebecca had found a buyer willing to pay $430,000 for our house, which gave us more flexibility. "If we put $180,000 toward the condo, that leaves you with $250,000, I calculated. "Yes," Rebecca agreed. "And the buyer is willing to delay closing for 60 days to give you time to purchase and move into the condo first." It was a reasonable solution. I would have security in a home suited to my needs as I aged. Rebecca would have the fresh start she craved and substantial capital to rebuild her life. But as I looked around the kitchen, at the breakfast nook where Michael had done his homework, at the height marks on the door frame, at the window overlooking my garden, I felt a profound sense of loss. "I'll need help packing," I said quietly. "There's 43 years of life in this house." Rebecca surprised me by reaching across the table and taking my hand. "I'll help you, we'll take it one room at a time, and anything that reminds you of Michael or your life with David, you should take it. Those memories belong with you." Her kindness after weeks of coldness brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you." Moving was both physically and emotionally exhausting. Each item I packed represented a memory, a piece of my life with David and Michael that I had to carefully wrap and place in boxes. Rebecca kept her word, helping me sort through decades of accumulation. Sometimes we worked in companionable silence, other times I found myself sharing stories about the items we encountered. "This was Michael's favorite book when he was 7, I said, holding up a tattered copy of Where the Wild Things Are. "He made David read it every night for months. He had it memorized." Rebecca smiled sadly. "He bought a new copy last year, said he wanted to have it ready for when we had kids." These moments of shared remembrance began to bridge the gap between us. I saw Rebecca not just as my son's widow, but as a woman grieving her husband and the future they'd planned together. And perhaps she began to see me not as an obstacle, but as someone who understood her loss in a unique way. The day before closing on the condo, Rebecca helped me pack the last of my belongings. Most of my furniture had already been moved, and the house looked strangely empty, echoing with our footsteps. "I found this in the basement," Rebecca said, holding out a small wooden box. "I think it was Michael's." Inside was a collection of childhood treasures, baseball cards, a Swiss Army knife, movie ticket stubs, and a small stack of Father's Day cards he made for David. At the bottom was a velvet jeweler's box. "What's this?" I wondered aloud, opening it to find a delicate silver locket. Inside was a tiny photo of Michael as a child, smiling gap-toothed at the camera. A note tucked beside it read, "For Mom, I was saving this for your 75th birthday. Love always, Michael." My birthday was 3 months away. He'd planned ahead, my thoughtful son, never knowing he wouldn't be there to give me this gift. I broke down then, sobbing in a way I hadn't allowed myself since the funeral. Rebecca put her arms around me, and we cried together in the empty house that had held so much of our lives. The next day, I signed the papers for my new condo. It was small but bright, with large windows and a patio just big enough for several planters. The living room walls were already filled with photos I'd brought from the house. David and me on our wedding day, Michael's graduation, family vacations, and newer additions. Michael and Rebecca's wedding, their trips together, Rebecca's law school graduation. I was making space for all our memories, not just my own. 2 days later, we completed the sale of the house. As Rebecca and I stood in the empty kitchen for the last time, I felt a strange mix of grief and acceptance. "Are you ready?" she asked gently. I nodded, taking one last look around. "I think so." As we walked out the front door, Rebecca hesitated. "I've been thinking about what you said about Michael not intending for you to be homeless if something happened to him. You were right. The life estate proves that. He wanted to make sure you were always taken care of." She handed me an envelope. "This is for you." Inside was a check for $30,000. "What's this for?" I asked, confused. "I'm splitting the proceeds from the sale of the garage items with you." The tools, the lawn equipment, Michael's workbench, all the things we sold separately, it seemed right. The gesture meant more than the money. It was an acknowledgement that those things had been part of my home too, my life with David and Michael. "Thank you," I said simply. We locked the door for the last time and walked to our separate cars. "Will you be all right?" Rebecca asked, in the new place. I thought about the small, manageable condo, arranged with my favorite things, bright with morning light. It wasn't the home where I'd raised my family, but it could be a good home for my remaining years. "I think I will," I said. "And you, what will you do now?" "I'm moving to Colorado next month," she said. "I've accepted a position at a law firm in Denver, a fresh start." I felt a pang at the thought of her moving so far away. Despite our difficult journey, she was my last connection to Michael. "We'll stay in touch?" I asked uncertainly. Rebecca nodded. "We're still family, Margaret, different than before, but still family." As I drove to my new condo that day, I reflected on the unexpected journey of the past 2 months. I had lost my son, nearly lost my home, and discovered strengths I didn't know I possessed. I had also gained something unexpected, a new understanding with Rebecca, a relationship that honored Michael's memory without being defined solely by his absence. The condo was quiet when I arrived, but not in the hollow way the empty house had been. This quiet felt peaceful, expectant. On the patio, I arranged my first few container plants, herbs and flowers transplanted from my garden at the house. It wasn't the same, but it was a beginning. That evening, as I unpacked the last few boxes in my new bedroom, I came across Michael's wooden treasure box. Sitting on my new bed, I opened the silver locket again and looked at my son's smiling face. "I miss you," I whispered, "every day." But for the first time since his death, the grief didn't feel like it would drown me. I fastened the locket around my neck where it rested close to my heart. Life would go on differently than I had imagined, but it would go on. And somewhere in that continuing story, there would be new moments of joy to balance the sorrow, new gardens to plant, new memories to create, and perhaps even a deeper connection with the daughter-in-law who is now the keeper of half my son's legacy. Outside my window, the sun was setting on my first full day in my new home. Tomorrow would bring more unpacking, more arranging, more adapting. But tonight, with Michael's locket against my skin and the first tentative roots of my new life taking hold, I allowed myself to believe in the possibility of peace. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.